Hello everyone, today we're gonna make a camera culling node group for geometry nodes using raycast with some parameters to fit our camera settings. You can download the full version on my Gumroad for free. The link is in the description. So let's dive into it. Let's move this finished version to the side and open a fresh Blender scene. Okay, so let's start. Let's delete the default cube and add a mesh plane. Let's scale it and divide it so we have some geometry to work with. Let's open a new window, set it to geometry nodes, and now we are ready to go. So the idea behind the method with the raycast I'm going to use is basically to have two planes that one of them is gonna intersect with the top right of the camera, and one is with the bottom left. And with this intersection we're going to create the rectangle of the camera. So let's start by creating a grid mesh and set it to 2 vertices. We don't need more. And let's view it. So we're going to scale this plane to a huge side, so we want to scale it from the origin. So let's transform it. Grab a transform node and set it to 0.5 on the x and the y axis. Okay, so let's take another transform node and let's join them together so we see what we're doing. And this one we want to set to minus 0.5. Okay, and now we can grab the camera, so we have the position and rotation of the camera. So let's grab a transform node and plug the location and rotation of the camera, and you can see it's working. Let's do the same with this one. And by the way, I'm not doing it after the join because we're gonna do the raycast before. We don't need to join them because they won't be visual geometry. Okay, so now we need the direction of the camera. So this plane is going to intersect with the top right corner. So we need so we need the bottom left direction of the camera. To get this, we need this vector from here to here. So we need to deconstruct Blender's camera. So let's start. We're gonna take a valley node, and this is gonna be our X resolution, and let's duplicate it, and this is gonna be our Y resolution. Let's set it to the default, which is just HD. And let's take another one, and it's gonna be our focal length, and this is gonna be our sensor size. Okay. So now in Blender, when you're in the camera, you can see that the camera is just a square that is divided by a ratio. So for example, if I have 1000 by 1000 pixels, it's going to be a perfect square. But if I'm going to reduce any of these values, it's going to shrink, but it's not going to be any bigger than this square. So this square is one length. Okay, so we're going to do divide both of them. Let's set it back. Okay, and we want to divide both of them and do it again, but the opposite ratio. So we said it couldn't be longer than this length, which is 1. So we want to clump it both of them. So if this one is more than 1, it will stay at 1 length, and this one will have any length it can be in the ratio which is not larger than 1. Now this is going to be our x and y. Let's first of all do the focal length. So the ratio of the focal length and the sensor size, which is here, is going to determine the distance from the origin of the camera to this position, to the last position. So for example, if I set it to 100, it will be twice as long. Same thing if I'm gonna set the sensor size to half. So I'm gonna divide them both to get the ratio, and now we want the distance from here for the length of this and the length of this position from the origin. So let's reset the camera location and rotation so we can easily see what you're doing. Disconnect that, and I'm gonna add a line mesh just so you can visualize it with mesh to point. Okay, so now we have a point that we can transform and see what we're doing. Okay, so the vector we want is the vector from this from the origin position to the bottom right and to the top left. The opposite. The bottom left and the top right. So let's combine x, y, z, and this ratio, this is the length of the x, and this is the length of the y, the ratio, because it's divided by 1. So let's plug that, and the ratio between the focal length and the sensor size is the distance of the camera. So this is going to be plugged to z, and let's view that. Okay, so right now it's the opposite, and it's multiplied by 2. So if I'm going to take multiply, and I'm going to set it to the -1, and I'm going to divide this one by 2, set it to divide, and this one by 2. It should work properly. Oh yeah, the focal length isn't right. 50 and 36. Okay, so now we have the position of the top right of the camera. The reason we will get rid of this multiply because we don't need it in the actual raycast, because the raycast is in the negative direction that we want. But we'll keep it for now just to visualize it. And the divide by 2 is because this point was in the center here, and it's in halfway from this length, because this is the length, so we need to divide it by 2 to get this distance. Okay, so now we also need the -1. So let's create another transform node with mesh line, and now we need to let's duplicate this combine xyz and set it to multiplied by -1. So instead of positive and positive, now we have negative and negative. So it should work properly if we connect the location. Yes. Okay, nice. So now we just need to convert it into direction, and it's very simple to do. Once we have the vector, we just need to normalize it. So it's normalizing basically said that the length of the vector will be 1, but the direction can be whatever you want. So let's normalize both of these vectors. So now we have the direction of the camera, which is exactly what we want. Now let's get rid of this multiply and of the visualizers. Great. So now we have the direction of these 2 points. Let's take the raycast. Wait, first of all, let's use a transform rotate vector, and let's rotate the vector based on the camera rotation. So let's change it to Euler, plug the rotation to the vector to vector, and rotation to rotation. The center can be 0, and now if we rotate the camera, this vector will follow. So let's add back our line. Okay, so it's following our camera exactly. Very nice. So now we need to connect our plane. So let's take the camera and just rotate it to some point. Okay, so let's plug the transform our grid to the raycast. You can disconnect that, don't need it anymore. And the direction is based on the ray direction is based on the direction of the camera that we set. Okay, so let's do 2 raycast. The other raycast should be with this vector. Okay, and let's take a grid and use a delete geometry to visualize what's happening. Let's plug it and plug the heat. Okay, so we have something. To see better, we're gonna use distribute points on faces, so it won't take much more geometry. Okay, so it's working, and actually working correctly. We just need to plug the second one, and let's do the Boolean math. Set it to add, and the add basically means if this one it's like intersections, because only if this one and this one are both outputting 1, then output 1. So it's exactly what we need. Let's take now we just need to use another transform and a value to scale both of these planes, because right now it's working, but you just can't see it. It's not working. Oh yeah, because the scale is 0. So it's working, but it's hard to see because yeah, the intersection of this and that, and it's outputting 0. So let's scale these planes until they touch. Let's see what's not working. Oh, this scale is not right. It's scaling from the wrong position. I think I need to... Oh yeah, I need to flip them, I think. Nope. Let's see what's happening. Oh, okay, we need to scale them before we before we give it the position of the camera, because right now it's scanning from this point, from the origin point, so it's scanning to there. Okay, now it should work properly. Okay, let's switch them back and plug this scale again. Here we go. It's working. Okay, now the only thing we need to do. So what's basically happening is that this plane is huge and this plane is huge, and we need to set them to some incredible value, like 10 million or something, so it will never go past that. It doesn't matter where your camera is. And now we have this intersection with the camera, and we have the second intersection with the camera, which is this one. And we're saying that just take this one and take this one. If they're both outputting 1, then output 1. So we get the exact position, the exact location in our plane. Okay, so it's working great. Now let's add a few controls. Let's organize it a bit. I'm going to make a node group of all of that. No, we don't need that. Okay, so by pressing Ctrl G we can group it, and now let's connect the X, the Y, the focal length, and the sensor size, and let's change the names. Let's also plug our camera. Change the name to camera and set it at the top. And we also want control to the raycast length, so we won't have problem with that. We can debug it outside of the node. And we probably don't need to touch it almost never. Okay, so let's add a few features. Wait, let's fix the values. Say the camera, and this was HD, and the sensor size, focal length is 50 and sensor size is 36. Okay, great. Now let's check if it's working with different values. Let's set it to any value. Okay, great. So one more feature I want to add is offset. So if, for example, have a tree here and it's growing, its leaves are going to be inside our camera, and we want to include it, so we won't have this problem of popping in and popping out. Okay, so to do that, we just need to, we're gonna take our planes, and we're gonna take this plane and move it diagonally, and exactly the same thing for the other plane in the other direction. So before we transform, we also don't need the output of the geometry. Okay, before the transform to the camera's position and rotation, we can take it and just bring it. Okay, it's working exactly as we want. So let's take a combine X, Y, Z and mix it with both of them. Take a value, let's plug it. Okay, and now we can see it's shifting. We want the and it's just because we need to invert one of them. Let's take a scale node and set it to -1. Now if you set a positive position, a positive value, it's going away from the camera, outwards from the camera. Okay, so let's call it offset. And now we have an offset. Okay. So there are a few more features we want to add still to have the full flexibility of the camera. One of them is that we want to be able to use instead of millimeters for the focal length, we want to use view of field, a field of view, which is just an angle of the camera instead of a distance. So for that, we just need to convert the angles to the millimeters, to the distance, and we're going to use trigonometry for that. So we have the camera here, and this is the distance we want, and we know that this unit is 1, and we know that the field of view that we have, let's set it to 45 so we have something nice to work with. Let's set this also to 40 to this value and put it in our focal length, so it's easier to work with these numbers. So this vector, so this length is 1, and we have this angle which is 45, and what we want is to get this angle at this length. So to do that, we can just use trigonometry. So we don't trigonometry is on we're gonna do it on this distance and this distance, so basically this triangle. So for that we need half of the angle, so half of 45 is 22.5, and half of this distance, because we just need this distance, is 0.5. So I'm going to do tan of half of 45 equal to our distance divided by 0.5. I don't know the terms for trigonometry in English, so excuse me for that. So now we're gonna multiply both of the sides by 2x. So we're gonna have 2 tan 45 divided by 2 multiplied by x equal to 1. So now we can just move this section to here, and we have x equals 2 tan of 45 divided by 2. So let's do it. We basically need the value of our angle, so let's set it to 45, and now let's add a divide note. Divide by 2 to get our angle, which now we have this section, and now we need to use a tan operation, and we also want to convert it to radians, because now we have degrees and Blender works in radians. So now we have all of this section, and now we just need to multiply by 2. Oh, I forgot. We need to divide everything by 1. I mean, divide 1 by the reciprocal. This should work properly instead of the focal length and the sensor size. And it's working. Let's see. Yeah. So let's change it to 30, 30, and let's change our value to 30. And yeah, it's working beautifully. Okay. So let's connect it to here instead, and let's call it field of view. And I want to add a switch node between floats to choose if you want to use focal length or field of view. So let's connect this switch to the group input, and let's call it use field of view, and let's move that both of these values to below the focal length. Okay, great. Now you know what, let's put it after the sensor size. Okay. So now we can also decide that we want to use the field of view. Let's set it to 30 for this case. And let's go back to millimeters and set it to 50 and use the 50 here. So we also created this effect. Let's save the file. You know what? Let's call it tat. Okay, great. So one more feature we want to add. Let's see. We have this focal length, sensor size. Okay, so we want to add a Shift X and Shift Y to our camera, because in the camera settings you can use Shift X and Shift Y to move the camera, but it's not moving it regularly. You can see it's moving it away from the origin point. So to do that, we need to change our vector, our direction. So instead of it being to here, being to here, you're gonna need to change it based on the X and Y we set it earlier. So very positive to know that we don't need it to be relative to the length of the camera, because I mean the length of the X and the Y, because it's not relative, it's just a fixed number. For example, if I put it to 0 and it should be here, if I move it 1 unit, it's gonna be here, because it's based on the 1. So if both of them be if it's gonna be square, so it will move exactly 1 unit. Anyway, let's take it back to the default, and let's also set this one to be the default. Okay, great. For that we just need to transform our vectors by a value. So let's take here subtract node and subtract from the x and the x and the y values in each of them. So let's add a value for the y and a value for the x. let's see if it's working correctly. Now let's shift by 1 in the X, and yep, it's working. So it basically just took the vector we are already putting and just offsetting it by some value. Also in both of them, one is after and before the multiply. So let's also connect that and set this one to be X shift and Y shift. Let's see if it's working. So let's change the X. Okay, let's change the Y to be 0.5. Let's okay, so it's working great. Reset the values. Okay, so I think that the last feature we want to add is an undercast. So let's say you have trees, and trees are going up and they're higher than the camera. So basically, if a tree is gonna be here and you won't see it until the camera reach to it, tree is just gonna pop in and out of the camera, and anything that is higher. Also, if the camera is at low angle. So, for example, for if you're rendering grass or something. So, it's actually very simple. We just need to take another transform node. So, what we're gonna do is that we have this one, and we have this one, and this one already have the under, as you can see. But we just want it to have to be stopped here instead of here. So we're gonna take this one and we're gonna move it down so it won't interrupt. Let's see. Okay, so the other direction, so minus. Okay, so let's go and just take a combine XYZ and plug it here, and let's add a value node to the Y, and let's add a multiply. This is a quick and dirty way to do it. You have other ways, but this is just a fast way to get the undercast working. So now let's just change the name to undercast, and let's see. Oops, we need to plug it back. Okay, so now if I change the undercast, we have, yeah, it's working. Oh, that's great. I think that's about all the feature I'm gonna add right now. So, by the way, you should use it backwards, obviously. So let's take the selection and just plug it here, and now we just want to use not boolean math set to not to get the inverted version, and let's delete by the not, so we have a cleaner edge, because the distributed points on faces is based on the topology, so you can see this clear facing faces, so we delete them. Okay, so I think that is about all the features. By the way, you can see things popping in and out here, points. That is because we, in the selection, you can see it's not clean. So to fix that, you can add more topology, and you can just change the offset here. This is also another use for it. And let's just change the array length, should be the last because you would barely use it. Offset should be pretty high. Let's set it after the X and the Y. No, yeah, let's put it below. Okay, So that is great. Anyway, I think that's about it. And you can also, if the undercast is not enough, you can just increase the value. So, because if you take your camera up, it will not work. So just increase the value until it's working. Okay. So have a great day. Enjoy, and you can download the full version in the Gumroad.
I hope this video was useful. Have a great day.